Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today I have a guest that I never done an interview before, but I felt that I wanted to interview the one and only Gary Jenkins. And the reason why I'm going to interview him is going to come up in the questions I'm going to ask him. So stay tuned, okay? So I'm just going to present Gary a little bit. I'm going to let him present himself fully in a few minutes. But Gary has a military background and he was born in Canada. And over to you, Gary.
Well, thank you very much. So, yeah, I was born in Canada, and at a very early age, my family moved to the United States, and I grew up in Arizona. And as a 5-year-old child, I was tested by the school, and they said, well, I still remember the test to this day. I took this test, and I wanted to go outside and play in the playground, so I just marked the answers on the test. I figured out you just had to circle certain things on every page. And so I just started going down the list and circling things because I thought if I got done with the test, I could go back outside and play. And that wasn't the case. I had to wait for everybody else to finish the test before we could all go out and play. But based on the test, they came back and said that I was educably retarded, that I was able to be in school, but I wasn't smart enough to, or damaged enough to go to like a specialty place where they just took daycare of kids. So when I went to school, because I was educably retarded, my desk faced the back wall. And I was not to participate in class. I was supposed to be silent and basically sit there for hours listening to what was going on behind my back.
Wow.
When I reached 8 years of age.
Wow. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what?
I was going to say, what year was that?
When I reached 8 years of age, that was 1960.
1960?
Yeah, that was 1960.
Wow.
And yeah, 1960. Yeah.
Yeah, go
so
ahead.
When I was 8 years old, under the state law at the time, I could leave school if I had a full-time job. And so I became a cowboy on a ranch in eastern Arizona. So I was 8 years old. I was a real cowboy. And my first jobs were fixing fence and things like that. They taught me how to do it. And I did that until I was about 14 and a half years of age, at which point I announced to my father that I didn't want to be a cowboy anymore. And he asked me what I was going to do. And I said, well, I'm going to go to school. And he just laughed at me. I went to school, and the teacher I had been trained on how to teach dyslexic children. And she said, you are dyslexic. You're very bright. She taught me how to read, how to write, how to do simple mathematics on her own time. And at the end of a year of education, I was able to read War and Peace, write a review of 30 characters from that novel with over 300. And I was able to do some simple mathematics. I went to school for one more year, mainstreamed, still behind everybody in many ways, but I coped with them, and I left school and entered into the U.S. military at age 17. I went to Southeast Asia during the Vietnam era, and so I saw combat, I saw fight. I wasn't in Vietnam, but I did a lot of fighting. And at the end of that period, I did a 180, because that's what crazy people do who come from dysfunctional backgrounds. We go from one direction to the opposite, and I became a Christian minister and did that for 18 months. And this church sent me to Germany. So I was in Germany being a Christian minister at 19 years of age, who had just come out of a war zone they didn't want me to be preaching because they didn't think I had any credibility. So I became a counselor. I counseled marriages. I counseled kids. I did that kind of thing. And I was very good at it. But I wasn't really cut out for the ministry. And everybody kind of figured that out. And at 18 months, we came to the conclusion that I should really leave the church ministry and return home. And they never defrocked me. They never removed my ordination. So I still hold the title of Reverend. But
Reverend Gary Jenkins.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Absolutely. I went back home to Arizona. I became a police officer. I was a police officer for 6 months. And I didn't really care for it too much. And I decided to go back into the military. And so I did. I went back into the military, and because I had been a minister, I was allowed to take a job that was not in the combat arms realm. And I could either be a chaplain's assistant, or I could be in the medical field if I wanted to be. And so I chose an area called behavioral science specialist, which was pretty new. And it was a cross between like a social worker and a mental health worker, doing a lot of counseling. It was a good fit for me.
Wow. Yeah.
And I did that for a couple of years. Yeah. And then when I was around 24, I got the real bug in me to go flying helicopters and to go into being an officer. And I was accepted into both schools. And the one thing I would have to say is, like, I never asked my higher power, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? It was like, I asked myself, what did I want to do? And 1 week before I was to leave, I didn't have to, but they said they were looking for volunteers to go work at a military reservation while troops were out in the field. And I volunteered for it because I was just kind of bored. And I got blown up. So I declared dead.
Wow.
And I know you want to ask more questions. You want to ask more questions about that part.
Yes.
I know that.
Yeah.
But after being blown up and declared dead like 40 times in a 3-month period, I started to recover. I walked out of the hospital after about 18 months of rehabilitation. I went off to university. I got a bachelor's degree in psychology, a master's degree in counseling psychology, and eventually I picked up a doctorate of divinity from a religious institution. Then I worked in mental health really for like 37 years. I picked up certificates in marriage and family therapy. I picked up certification as a sex addictions therapist. I was trained by Patrick Carnes, who's really quite the founder of the whole concept. And that led to getting certification in other process addictions. After 37 years and being in the UK, I left counseling totally and went into the corporate structure, settling difficulties between landlords and tenants. And then when COVID broke out, that came to an end. And I'm of the age where I should be retired, but I look too good to be retired, in my opinion. So I decided to go into the digital world to discover what's going on. I've written a book that's being published next month. And now I'm a podcaster, and I'm really loving it. And that's how I really got to know your host today, because I've interviewed her because she's an amazing writer.
Oh, bless you. I'm going to read your book. Yeah, I'm actually reading it right now.
You're reading the rough draft.
So, I mean, I have a set of questions that I want to ask, but this one thing that just came up from your conversation right now, and that is like, did you have this, all the things that you've done written in your mind's eye when you were a young boy? This is who I want to be one day. And as you visited or seen people, you were inspired by them, and then you became that. Were they like dreams of yours? And then you've done so many things.
You know, I'll tell you the truth. When I was a young boy, cowboy, and I was riding on the saddle, and I worked all by myself fixing fence, and I did that for the longest time. It's really boring work. I used to sit there and say, I don't want to have a boring life. I want to do something exciting. I want to have some adventure in my life. And while I'm going through my life, I mean, I've been in 40 countries. I've jumped out of airplanes. I've mined for gold in a river in Peru. I've done all kinds of different things in my life. And I keep thinking, gee, I wish my life was more exciting. you know,
Your wife and life.
and yeah, because I'm living the life. I think it's normal. I just think this is what everybody does. It's when I tell stories about my life, people go, amazing.
Yeah, like I went like, hey, I need to interview this guy.
Yeah.
So like, what is your biggest failure and what did you learn from it?
Well, I'll tell you, when I was about 13 years of age, I went to some kind of a youth conference where there was a man named Harmon Killebrew. Now, Harmon Killebrew was an American baseball player, and he, a few years earlier, had been awarded the Rookie of the Year for baseball. And he gave a very nice kind of like speech. I'm not really into baseball, but I kind of thought it was kind of cool that he was there talking. And he opened himself up to questions, and he asked, does anybody have any questions? And this one kid stood up and said, being a famous baseball star and things like that, what's the biggest fine you ever paid? And he looked at the kid really kind of weird. He says, I don't know. I've never paid it. Because he'd never been fined. He followed all the rules that baseball has. He's always on time, never late, attends every practice, etc. Well, the lesson didn't get by me, and I look at life and I say, boy, I've had some big mistakes, but I haven't made the biggest one yet, and I haven't failed at all because I just keep going. I just keep going on. But I sometimes I say, like, what was the biggest mistake? I had a failed marriage. And sometimes I say, well, maybe that's my big mistake, but that's not just my mistake. There's other people involved in that. I can take responsibility for what happened, but I have learned from it. And as long as you learn from it, there are the golden seeds of opportunity for you to do something better. I cannot expect other people to make changes or to have the growth or to want to continue a journey that I'm on. But my life has been a massive journey. And it's the progressive realization of my worthwhile dreams, my worthwhile goals is what life is all about. And people come into my life sometimes for just a month or two. Other people come in for a few seasons. And then there are those people who are there with me, and we're going to be walking this path to the end. And I think that's the way it is. When we die, we can't take our money, we can't take our house, but we can take our experiences and I believe our relationships with us.
Wow, what an inspiring answer. I mean, you remind me of, like a train. Whoever enters the carriage, some people have to get off at a certain stop, other people stay, and other people go with you right till the end of the destination. I like that answer. Now, there's a
Well,
reason
thank you.
why. No, I mean, really rich life experience and a lot of wisdom and so much you've done, so much you've done. And that is why I'm going to question number 4 or 5. I don't know. And there's a reason why I called you for this interview, because you have a very inspiring part that I uh, it made me believe in a lot of things. Do you want to say a bit of your part of your story that's going to inspire all those people today who are going to be watching you and listening to you?
Well, I tell you that this is not something that I really talk a lot about. But Lucy and I are friends, and I shared this with a small group of people, and Lucy told me the impact it's had in her life and the life of other people. And so I've agreed to share this. When I was 24, and when I was supposed to be going to be an officer and a helicopter pilot for the U.S. military, just before I left for that schooling, I took this assignment because I was bored to just work at an aid station. And a call came in that somebody was acting a little odd, and they wanted a behavioral health specialist to go out and interview him. And I got blown up by 2 105 howitzer rounds. And they had already told me on the radio that the range was safe, that they were having no guns firing, no nothing. But things happen. And when I got blown up, in the distance, I barely remember there was a helicopter flying around. And I was actually thinking about, hey, that's going to be me in a year. I'm going to be flying a helicopter. Unfortunately, or fortunately, inside that helicopter was a flight surgeon and a nurse. And they were actually looking at my vehicle driving down the road when it got blown up. So within about 30 seconds, I had a medical doctor and a trauma nurse attending me. And I was declared dead. And they took a body bag to put me inside the body bag. But they didn't, it was a training exercise. So they didn't really come prepared for taking care of casualties. And when they pulled that body bag zipper up, it had a broken teeth, and it only would come up to my chin. It wouldn't cover. So they kind of pulled the rest of the bag around my head, but it was still open. And they laid me in the helicopter in this bag because they didn't want me bleeding all over the place. They didn't want to be cleaning out the blood. And when we were airborne and they were taking me back, presumably just my body, the nurse wiped away some tears from my eyes, and then she recognized that I wasn't dead. And so that body bag being broken literally helped save my life, because the nurse corrected the doctor and said, look, he's crying, dead people don't cry. And they took me right back down. But I will say that when I was dead, because there was a point in time when I clearly recall being outside of my body, looking down at my body, hearing all the lovely tones that they talk about that, you might hear after you die. Some people say that's your brain dying. I don't think that's true. I just think that's the experience. I remember feeling loved. Just totally loved. You can take whatever you call on earth love from other people, and magnify it thousandfold. That's what I felt. And I saw an image, a personage, I sensed something. I can't say I saw anybody really, I just sensed, and I knew that somebody was present. I knew it was somebody familiar. I knew it was somebody who was there to care for me and to help me. And it was quite an odd conversation because it was mostly mental. There was like no language, no words. It's just like kind of new thoughts. And it was kind of like, well, hi there. You weren't supposed to be here today. you know,
The wrong day.
you know, yeah. But you're here, so it's okay. It's kind of, and I'm kind of thinking like, well, this is strange. This is, I'm expecting fiery pits and things like that, and this is really, really lovely. And the two of us, we just kind of like reviewed my life, and there's things that you're happy and proud about. There's things that you're kind of like, ooh, and this guy's kind of like laughing a little bit, saying, "Oh, I bet you wish you could do that over again." Yeah, I've been raised with this kind of like idea about this judgment thing, and guilt and sin and shame, and it wasn't anything like that. It was more like I was judging me. And this guy was kind of like guiding me through it, trying to keep me from being too harsh or too serious with myself. And somehow we're moving. And there's times when I become aware that there are other entities. Some of them I feel are familiar. Most of them aren't. But every once in a while, somebody would kind of like stop and say, "Oh, it's so good to see you again. So you're here now." I don't know. But I don't recognize them. I don't see. There's nothing for me to recognize. It's kind of like just an impression. And I get this impression that I've kind of come to this point. And the guy says, "Now, if you go any further, you do have to stay here. But you can go back. You can go back, and you can be alive, and and be in life, because you're not really supposed to be here yet, but you have free choice." And I remember thinking, there was some things in that movie that I probably could do better, kind of a thing. So I decided to go back, and when I'm there, it's like I feel no pain. I feel, you're just not aware of anything like physical sensation or, I mean, when you know people's thoughts, but you're not hearing them, you just know what they're telling you. It was, I have a hard time putting it into words, what was going on.
I think you put it up pretty well, yeah.
Yeah, but I can tell you that when I re-entered the body, and I remember that, it was like being in a vortex, feeling like I was actually spinning and going in my body. And it was painful. It hurt. It was the most awful feeling coming back into of course, my body was busted up, it had been blown up. And I went back in. Yeah. And, at that point, when I was back in, I think it's when the lady said, "Oh, he's crying." I think that's when the nurse says, "Oh, he's crying," And of course, they immediately landed the helicopter at the closest trauma center that was available to bring me in and get me stabilized so they could take me elsewhere. And while I was there, I died, and I hated dying, because I knew I was going back into the body, because that was my choice. My choice was to return to the body, and I knew how painful that was every time, and it didn't get less painful. It just, so like, I look forward to the day I die. Whatever day that is, I have no fear of that. And the dying thing, I have no fear of.
Wow.
What I have a fear of is getting really messed up bad and going back in the body. No, I don't want that. That really hurts.
Yeah. And I remember part of our conversation, you told me that the doctors told you that you won't ever walk. And the treatment also that they were going to give you, there was an inner voice that explained to us a little bit about that. That inspired me a lot.
Yeah. Well, when I had begun to recover, I had the doctors telling me that they wanted to do spinal surgery on me. And I said no, because the inner voice said no. The inner voice told me, "You will walk again. you will walk out of this hospital and you will walk out under your own power. And the doctors were saying, if you don't have this operation, you will be an invalid for the rest of your life. You will be lucky to be in a wheelchair. You will most likely be bedridden for the rest of your life if you don't let us do what we want to do. And the voice kept saying, no, say no. And because I was conscious now, I could refuse the treatment. And pretty soon the doctors kind of like just left me alone. And I just remember one day telling a nurse, the head nurse, that I wanted to get up and walk now. And she said, you can't. And I said, well, can you help me sit up? And so they did. And I had my feet dangling. And really 2-3 seconds of dangling my feet was just too much for me. But we started doing that every day. And I kept talking about, I'm going to walk out of this hospital. I'm going to walk on my own power. I'm going to do this. And they're telling me, well, we don't really want you to be disappointed. They're trying to be kind. I'm trying to follow what the voice says. And one day I just said, okay, today's the day I'm going to stand. And I just slid, and the aide and the nurse were caught off guard, and I landed right on my feet and just collapsed directly to the floor because my feet weren't prepared to do anything.
Take that. Yeah.
Yeah, but it got to the point where every day I said, if you guys will hold me, I want to stand up. And it got to the point where I could actually stand on my own 2 feet. I might be leaning on the bed. I might be depending on them to stabilize me and hold me. But I was standing on my own 2 feet. And that was enough to get one young doctor to sign the order for me to go to rehabilitation. And when I went to rehabilitation, it was the first day that I had a husband and wife team who had just started working in that hospital. Both of them were professional bodybuilders that were physical therapists. And they were doing the physical therapy gig because they had just lost an endorsement from some nutrition company. So they needed some extra money. And so they had come into this hospital. And they said, if you want to walk, we will work with you every day until you do. And what was cute about them was his name was Kim, K-I-M. Her name was Kim, K-Y-M. And so I called him he, Kim, she, Kim. And they took care of me. And about a year later, I was walking with 2 canes out of the hospital for good.
Wow, that's so amazing. I just every time I hear that, I just like, even I told my dad, he was like blown away, Like, if not, let me go get on to this. If you were in my shoes, what question would it be that you would like me to ask you?
Okay, I asked that question of everybody, and I'm totally unprepared right now. I think the question I would ask me is, do you believe there's life after death?
Okay, there's your question then.
I have experienced death according to how man understands it. And I was there, and now I'm back. How long that goes on, I can't tell you in this experience. But one thing I do know is that what relationships we have had on this earth must exist there because people recognized me and knew me. Also, there were people I had no relationship with here because they just kept passing me by going one way or another. And so I know that whatever is on the other side is busy. Everybody's doing something. You're not playing little harps floating on clouds all day long. It seems like we all have energy and we are to expend it in doing some effort on the other side. So with that evidence that I have brought back to me here, I can definitively say life continues on the other side of this mortal coil. It's just there. To me, there's no debate about it. I don't see how there can be a debate. I guess you can debate whether there's reincarnation. I guess you can debate other things. That's open because I don't know the answer to that, but I do know for me, death is not the end of my existence.
Wow. Wow. That like takes me to the next question now, which is if you have 2 minutes, or you can take a bit more. What is your message to the world? If you could give a message, what would that be?
Okay, my message would be, number one, the most powerful thing that any one of us possess is our ability to think. We can formulate a thought in our mind. And if we can formulate that thought in our mind, we are capable of creating whatever that thought is about. And that this world that we live in is full of whatever the substance of our minds is all about. I just saw this thing by Brian Cox where he's talking about studying black holes. They have now become convinced that literally the world we live in is a hologram, very much like the movie of The Matrix. That's what they're contemplating now. And so formulating a thought that is held and focused on can prevent us from failure in any regard, because we will eventually achieve it. And I truly believe that we as human beings have a godlike potential within each one of us to be creators, because everything that's on this planet that you see that was touched and made by man is from the mind of a creator. Your house, your curtains, your car, the road that's laid outside, the pipes that come into the building, everything started up here in somebody's mind. And reality just fulfilled it. However, we had to manipulate it, but it got there. And so for me, the mind is powerful, and your thought, a pure thought, is the construction particle for everything that exists in our universe. That's
Wow.
my 2-minute rant.
That is so deep, man. That is so deep. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Gary Jenkins, thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing with us. How can anyone contact you if they did want to contact you? I forgot that question.
I can tell you what, I have a podcast. It's Gary's Glorious Golden Nuggets. I'm on every podcast downloading platform, I believe now. So Apple Store, you can get the apps from the Google Store. You can go to Spotify, anything else. I'm on there. You can get on there. I have contact details in the notes on every show. You can just get back with me if you want.
Amazing.
Okay. And I have a Facebook group called Gary's Glorious Golden Nuggets. You can contact me there as well.
Brilliant. There you go, guys. Gary Jenkins for today. Lovely meeting you, lovely chatting to you, and lovely interviewing you today. Thank you, and have a lovely day.
Thank you to Lucy. It was a joy.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
All
Bye.
my pleasure. Bye.